There we go. Continue. You have to press continue if you want to continue. I am Barbara Champeau, a current CREWNY New York director, past president and chair of our new member engagement and empowerment committee, which is presenting today's event. On behalf of this committee and CREWNY New York, we are delighted to see you all here for today's program, The Commercial Real Estate Influence of Asset Managers. You'd be surprised how much power they have. It features, as you can see, an impressive array of CREWNY New York members who are incredibly talented and experienced commercial real estate market leaders. If you have not already done so, please rename yourself with at least your first and last name, if not your company, so we know who you are. Please also turn your video on if at all possible. It is certainly more personal when we can all see each other and better for screenshots, but do keep in mind my previous disclaimer on use of the video. We have such an amazing panel today that is certain to be content rich. So our program will be focused almost entirely on our speakers. But before getting down to business, we need to quickly recognize and give a big thanks to our CREWNY New York 2021 sponsors for their longstanding loyalty and generous support of CREWNY New York, especially during challenging times. At the platinum level, we have Fidelity National Title Group. At the gold level, we have Kimco Realty, Speaker Julia Rocco's company, and TREP. At the silver level, we have Ackerman, Anshin, CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield, Jack Resnick and Sons, JB&B, Langen, Marcus & Millichap, and Zetlin and DiChiara. At the bronze level, we have Hannigan Construction, Calico, and Silverstein Properties, the company of another of today's speakers, Lisa Bavacqua. And finally, at the friends level, we have Meridian Capital Group and WB Wood. So thank you all sponsors, and thank you, Julia and Lisa, for your support. If you have a question for the speakers, I suggest you put it in the chat as we go, and we will do our best to respond during the Q&A segment following the discussion. I encourage you to use private chat for any personal reconnecting and use the main chat room primarily for questions for the panel. Just to be sure that I don't miss anything. I want to make sure we try to get to as many of those questions as possible. Now, I am pleased to introduce the facilitator extraordinaire of today's discussion among our distinguished asset managers, Carolyn Pianin, Senior Vice President, Arcturus Group. I want you to know that the views expressed by our panelists today are their personal views and do not represent the opinions of their respective companies or necessarily reflect the opinions of their companies. So let me stop share so you can see our wonderful panelists, and we'll turn it over to Carrie.
Good afternoon. I am so glad that all of you joined us this afternoon. We have a terrific group of panelists, and I am really excited to get the program going. My name is Carolyn Pianin. I'm a Senior Vice President of Arcturus, and we are a boutique real estate investment and advisory shop based here in New York. I head our asset management group that focuses on taking care of properties on behalf of our institutional and high net worth clients. My portfolio currently comprises over 30 retail properties, about 1,200 multifamily units, and about 2 million square feet of office space. Today, joining the conversation is Lisa Bavacqua, who is a member of the executive team at Silverstein Properties. She's been with Silverstein over a decade and is the executive vice president and head of asset management, overseeing the firm's portfolio comprised of about 16 million of office and multifamily assets. She also created and co-leads the company's tenant experience and hospitality platform known as Inspire, and we will hear more about that during the conversation. Joan Berkowitz joins us from Community Development Trust, where she is the Chief Portfolio Officer and responsible for the asset management of their equity portfolio. CDT is a REIT specializing in affordable housing. She has been with CDT for about 18 years, and she focuses on affordable housing projects. But it turns out prior to joining CDT, Joan worked at Lehman Brothers, and we actually just figured out that we worked together a long, long time ago and have a lot of people that we know in common, which is just terrific. Julia Rocco is president-elect of New York CREW. So It's fantastic to have her speaking today. She is a senior director of asset management at Kimco, where she's worked for over 15 years, and she oversees a very large retail portfolio comprised of about 120 properties with 1,200 tenants and about 15 million square feet. And Stella Sherpa is a senior vice president of real estate investment manager for the Bank of America, where she is an asset manager of a variety of assets for the bank's high net worth clients. And she acts as a trustee for a portfolio comprised of retail, industrial, and residential properties valued in excess of $100 million. So I highly suggest that if you have not already done so, go online and look at the background of my esteemed colleagues, because they are pretty impressive. And I think you'll see a lot of fantastic experience and tenure in the industry. My first question to the group is, can you please describe a little bit more about your portfolio and share one or two unexpected difficulties or positive outcomes that you've dealt with in the past few years, March 2020. Lisa, would you like to go first?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So as Carrie had said, I run our asset management department here at Silverstein Properties. Office multifamily, it's about 16 million square feet. We're in New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia. In addition to that, I also oversee our Inspire platform, which we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into it. But in terms of difficulties, I would say, being in asset management, one of the things that's critically important is to be able to work with all of the different people that we work with on a daily basis. And how our asset management is structured at Silverstein is it's very collaborative. So we all, myself and my asset management team, our leasing team, operations, and accounting, we actually all report into the COO, which is a little different from asset management structures in other companies where perhaps leasing and property management are actually reporting into asset management. So here at Silverstein, in terms of our collaborative asset management, for me and my team, what was incredibly difficult during the past almost 2 years was being away from all of my colleagues. We need to work together to get things done at our properties, and not having those in-person conversations or passing by and having an ad hoc meeting in the hallway while we're in the office. It was really, really tough. Fortunately, we've been back for I guess almost 9 or 10 months now, and it's made such a huge difference to be able to work closely with everybody again.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's I think so many of the real estate firms are really pushing to have people back in the office, right? And that's the way that we get everybody else back in the office. It's so important for our livelihoods.
Yes.
Joan, what's your take on what you faced that was either surprisingly difficult or surprisingly positive in since COVID started?
I would say it's easiest possibly to start with the most difficult, because that's what happened first. Is everybody at our firm suddenly, our directors, our investors wanted to know what was going to happen. Our portfolio is primarily multifamily all over the country, and it's affordable housing. Everybody's first concern was, what happens if everybody loses their jobs, doesn't pay any rent? What's going to happen to the firm? So we had to scramble. We always do a lot of reporting to everybody about what's going on with the portfolio and what our strategy is for improvement, et cetera, and what the future looks like. But we went into this mode of running sensitivity analysis like you've never seen before. What if people pay 20% of the renters don't pay? What if 40% of the renters don't pay? What's that going to look like? From a financial statement perspective, from a cash flow perspective, et cetera. So we had to scramble. We all had to learn how to use Zoom really well. I had always left it up to somebody else to figure it out. We had to learn how to work remotely, learn how to communicate really well, and learn how to run sensitivity analysis from our various locations and learn how to collaborate that way. The good thing is, I think I've got a really awesome team, and we've done a great job doing so. I think the positive is that things have turned out better in our portfolio than I ever expected. So that has been really great. I have to say we've been helped by some government support with rental assistance and the like too. But we've been able to communicate well. We've been going into the office 2 days a week for some time now, so that's been okay, but we're not at full capacity. So we're still not back to normal, I wouldn't say. But overall, I just think, as a team, we've worked hard at communicating well. I think everybody has to learn how to be a coach a little bit and remember to keep people engaged. I think using Zoom too often versus a phone call has worked out really well for us. So I guess I'll stop there. I could go.
Joan, I think one of the things that you mentioned was that surprisingly, because your tenant base tends to be critical workers, or that you really didn't lose much in terms of rent and other things as well. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, there are areas, there are pockets where we are having issues, maybe New York City a little bit more. As I mentioned, we invest all over the country. New York City tenants can be tough, and we've got some challenging buildings. But overall, I think our collections were close to 90%. And we do have some Section 8 properties. Those are just not collection issues at all, not surprisingly, but just regular tax credit type properties. They've been probably, I would say, averaging 90% collections, which is pretty good. So,
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Julia, given that you're focused on retail, I would love to hear, how Kimco dealt with, the beginning of the pandemic, which I think retail, right, was really hurt. And then what's happened recently, I've read and seen so much activity going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would echo a lot of what Joan said earlier on in the pandemic. It was a scramble to really do that sensitivity analysis to figure out, based on what percentage of the portfolio would things be sustainable or potentially, critical to our overall portfolio's performance. And given the complete shutdown that the New York metro area was dealing with, it was pretty chaotic. Luckily for us, a lot of our portfolio is considered necessity-based or essential retail. And so even though we were in the middle of doing ground-up development, we were able to continue operating because the government recognized that, we are a critical service to the communities. I would say once things reopened, it was a learning curve to really understand what tenants had businesses that were viable during the pandemic to operate under such limited conditions. There were a number of operators who, pivoted and quickly figured out that if they weren't on DoorDash, they needed to do so. And then I think there were identifying those businesses that were just completely decimated, like, the dry cleaners and the fitness players, which really didn't see any kind of relief until I would say maybe September of 2020. And even today, with no one going into the office, I used to visit the dry cleaners once a week. I think now, if I go once every month to 2 months, that's actually a lot. So we've done a lot of research and trying to understand exactly what our tenants are up against, what their challenges are, and how we can help them.
Okay, and Stella, what about you and your portfolio?
So my portfolio is probably a little bit different. So I have retailers. So during the pandemic, that's where we actually was probably our worst. We received letters on April 1st stating that they were not going to pay rent. And it didn't have a plan. It didn't say when they were going to start, to pay. They were just going to stop paying rent. So we actually at the bank started a task force with asset managers, senior management, legal compliance, and attorneys and everybody. And we started to figure out once a week what we were going to do. So these, as the portfolio, as these tenants were not paying, that means no revenue. And the revenue, since our properties are held individually by high net worth clients, there was no distributions to be made if that was their portfolio. Luckily, I only had really 3 tenants, mostly apparel and a restaurant. Everyone else, as Julia and everyone said, we figured out that, a grocer, medical office, certain discipline or certain industries actually did well. So I'm still actually working through the restaurant owner as of today, because they're still struggling. So that was mine was mostly rent relief and less revenue and less distributions for our clients.
Did you do rent? Like, did you?
Yeah, we did. We didn't start these negotiations. We got the letter on April 1st. Negotiations really didn't start till maybe May or June, just because we thought, we shut down on March and we were going to be in the office in 2 weeks. Like, no one knew. And then April came and I'm like, okay, we're still not in the office. So we kept waiting to see what was going to happen. So by May and June, we're like, we have to do something. So we started rent relief, abatements, deferrals. Some of my tenants' lease came up for renewal. So we started lease renewals, pushing back when the rent would start. We did market rent obviously decreased. So that's also a decrease. So yeah, a lot of a combination of everything, whatever we could do to work it out. And we did. We didn't lose anybody.
You didn't lose any tenants?
No.
Wow.
We worked it all out. Yeah, we worked it all out.
Yeah, that's
I mean, it's not the fault of the
all my
retailers.
portfolios, but I have some in Manhattan that are on the west side, in the 30s and 40s, and
Yeah.
those buildings with the smaller tenants.
I don't have anything in Manhattan, so luckily.
Oh, right. But well, Lisa, what about you? What did you experience? And Julia, in terms of negotiating new rents with tenants and what was your experience dealing with all those same kind of issues?
I mean, I think very similar to what the other panelists have said. I think we were surprised at how well the rent collections were going. Right off the bat, I think we had, for the most part, most of our office tenants were paying their rent. Our resident, we have about 2,300 units in Midtown West, and that was a little bit more challenging as it relates to some of those units. And then we have some small retail in our residential buildings and some in our office buildings. And I think similar to what Stella had said, we were getting a lot of rent relief requests, which we granted. Most of them, we really wanted to keep our tenants in the properties. But really, we were really surprised, I think, at how well many of our tenants did. I think it was fantastic. And the ones that needed help, we tried to work with them as best as possible. We also did a lot of short-term extensions in our office buildings. I think, we've been finding that not many office tenants have been wanting to commit to another 10 or 15 years throughout this time, as you can imagine, with all the uncertainty. And so we worked with them to just do 1 and 2 year extensions and hopefully preserve the relationship and do everything that we can when they are ready to commit long-term again to keep them in our properties. So that was also something we focused a lot of attention on.
Mm-hmm. Julia, what about you?
Yeah, we've had a similar experience. I would say the vast majority of our portfolio held up very well, with a small portion of local tenants needing either deferrals, rent relief of some kind. So we did really our best, I would say, to work with the tenants on terms that they could honor. What we didn't want to do was create a situation where they had just a mountain of rent that was accruing and they would never be able to get out from under it, because what that would end up doing is it really did not incentivize them to to make the business as successful as it could be. So we were very conscious of that. I think initially it took some time to really understand that, because we were not abating any rent for a number of months. And so it probably, I would say, those conversations, we didn't enter into any of those conversations until like September, October of last year. Which, you know, it was just this constantly evolving situation that we were trying to figure out how to navigate. And so, you know, once we realized that we needed to go a little bit above and beyond, and even shared in some of the hurt that the tenants were experiencing, we were able to successfully negotiate a number of lease extensions and early renewals. So, you know, from our perspective, that was a huge win, where we were able to convert options to permanent term in, I would say, over the next 2 to 3 years, looking out at that window. And you know, it probably also helped us maintain occupancy, as well as I would say, you know, avoid any legal situations where in the New York metro area, you know, we're not able to evict for non-payment of rent. And so it just kind of would put us in this legal purgatory where we would have all of these units that aren't revenue generating. And it just creates this stalemate between the tenant and the landlord. Whereas, you know, from our perspective, we feel that we're much more successful if we can come to a mutual agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think everybody can say that that's sort of the big difference between the pandemic, right, and the financial crisis, that people really tried to work things out with existing tenants. Do you all agree? I mean, I think that that's something that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One point I'd like to make just about asset management. I mean, asset management, based on this discussion, what I'm hearing, asset management can be, you know, an asset manager can have a portfolio of assets that just hums along. Okay. And you're collecting your money or whatever you're doing, and rents are going up the way they should, and all expenses are fine and they're controlled and it's all good. But when you have challenges, and what I'm hearing is it's a little bit of a workout situation, that's when you really, really learn a lot more. That's when you get into your documents and read your documents, you run a lot more numbers and you understand how to model better. I mean, it's challenging. I mean, one time I said something at my firm about how I enjoyed litigation, and my new boss freaked out a little bit. I don't really, but boy, do you learn an awful lot when you have a situation that involves litigation or working something out, whether it's a tenant or on the lender side, whatever side it is. That's when it's most challenging, and that's when you deal with different different types of, whether it's lawyers, accountants, et cetera. That's when you bring it all to bear and you use all sides of your brain at one time, and that's what the most exciting part of it, in a way, even though it's not always a good situation. You're trying to make it better. So asset management in and of itself doesn't sound too exciting, but when it gets into a workout situation, that's really the best learning experience.
But that's when whatever is in your documents and how well they are drafted really comes into play, right? I mean, and it does get exciting. Are you in default? Are you in default under your loan documents? What happens when the tenant doesn't pay? How does that impact, your loan covenants? Does the tenant have a right to go dark? What happens if one tenant goes dark, or you reach a certain amount of vacancy in your building, and how quickly can you kick the tenant out? What are your rights? How does that good guy guarantee actually work? How does it come into play? It's fascinating. Just fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's change the topic a little bit. Lisa, I want to get back to Inspire. There are so many things, and I want to talk about what you're all seeing in the market, because I feel like the market's starting to come back. But one of the most important things, I think, that's sort of a hot topic right now is AI and technology and how you attract tenants into your buildings. So Lisa, if you could just talk a little bit about Inspire, I would love to learn about that, how you came up with the idea and what it does, and then we can all chime in about what, some of your firms are doing to attract tenants.
The idea, I guess I came up with it back in 2017, maybe, or 18. And it was really driven by the shifting demographics. So many more millennials were in the workforce versus baby boomers and Gen X. And I had been doing a lot of research about, their focus on experiences and how they tend to move from job to job more so than perhaps previous generations. And it got me thinking about how we can think about the office and that experience that an employee has from a day-to-day basis. And if we're trying as a landlord, as an office landlord, to attract and retain companies in our buildings, then it behooves us to do everything we can to partner with them to ensure that they can attract and retain talent within their organization. And if the demographics were shifting in such a way that I think it was like 3/4 of the global workforce it was like 2023 or 24 were projected to be millennials. I thought that companies are going to have a particularly greater focus on attracting and retaining talent. And so that's kind of where it all started. But ultimately what it is a brand where we are striving to achieve a exceptional hospitality infused services, experiences, content, and products basically across our portfolio. So think about it as like a holistic customer experience, whether you're in our office buildings or our residential buildings, that reshapes how, when, and where you work. And when I say work, so much of our population these days is working from home. So that's kind of where the residential piece of it comes in. But it's basically bringing, 5-star service, amenity spaces, social and wellness programming, data-driven workplace technology, which is the AI piece, which I'll get back to in a second, and really flexible workspaces. So whether it's desks, co-working, conference rooms, to all of the customers throughout our portfolio. And we've opened up our entire portfolio. So if you're an office tenant that signed a lease at 7 World Trade Center, for example, you have access, you and all of your employees have access to all of the other spaces that we have across our portfolio. So if you're, traveling on business out to LA, you can go on our proprietary app that we created. You can make a reservation to use the amenity space at our building in LA, a conference room, a workspace, whatever you need. And when you arrive, that can be your touchdown place. So we're really trying to build a greater community of people within our properties and enhance the experience that they have day to day to, again, help partner with these companies to attract and retain talent. The AI piece of it that we've been using to also attract and retain tenants within our buildings is something that we call Dojo. It's basically an AI-based office planning tool. And it's been extremely helpful to partner with our current tenants in bringing them back to the office safely, kind of while maximizing employee productivity and social distancing. But really now, as we're hopefully moving out of the pandemic, it's a tool that analyzes how employees interact and communicate with each other. And it uses AI to reconfigure your office layout so that you can achieve the most efficient space while maximizing employee productivity and performance. So it's been an incredibly fantastic space planning tool that we've been using not only with our existing tenants, but also to attract new tenants to our portfolio. So I think the combination of those two things is what we've really been focusing on in terms of attracting new tenants to the properties.
I'm going to guess that Kimco also does a lot of work in terms of coming up with new ideas and integrating AI. Is that the case, Julia?
I would say, just started looking into that. We're probably the best example that I could think of is with respect to lease abstraction. We're looking at AI for those purposes. I don't know that it's as advanced as we would like that technology to be, but certainly our tenants are using all sorts of new technology So, point of sale systems that use business intelligence to help ordering inventory or managing any supply chain issues. I think, personally, or from Kimco's perspective directly, we see new technology in terms of like building maintenance systems, cooling and heating systems, lighting. And then more recently, we've been exploring like augmented reality so that you can use it for like walkthroughs almost, like you can get a sense of what the architectural plans would look like for like really immerse yourself into that 3D technology, which is really cool. But I mean, it's definitely at the forefront of the industry. There are all types of things that are on our radar as far as robotics for bricklaying, for example, which, something in the development and construction world would have taken weeks and months or years even to build, could now potentially be narrowed down to hours or days or weeks. So it significantly shortens the amount of time that people or companies are outlaying that cash before they're able to actually have an asset that they can monetize.
Julie, you just mentioned something that is a really hot topic right now, supply chain issues, right? Supply chain issues and inflation. And I know it's November, so we're all in the middle of budgeting for 2020. Stella, Joan, do you want to maybe hit on some of those two issues and how it is impacting your portfolios?
I'll start. I don't really have supply issues in my portfolio because most of my leases are triple net leases. And if we do any kind of renovations, it's the tenant that does it. And we're on we negotiate that during the lease negotiations where we will do rent, 3 months rent or credits towards TI instead of actually taking the building and doing it ourselves, the renovations. So for us, I haven't had any issues with tenants. I had one tenant renovated a unit this summer and it went fine. It was really just the town being slow giving out permits because nobody was in the office. They were like off, I'm like, who's off? We're still working. So that was the only problem. Supply and demand didn't really hurt us.
Yeah. We've had nothing debilitating, but I would say it has been on the rehab tenant turnover space kind of front. Longer lead time to get appliances, cabinets to some degree, mostly like the appliance front, I would say. But again, nothing that's really held us up too much. We've got a pretty big rehab on a portfolio of properties in New York City, actually, with NYCHA. And I think they just sort of got their ordering done early enough that things have been going okay. I somewhat related, I've certainly noticed on the municipal front, things are taking longer, all over the country. What are people doing? Just because they're working from home? I don't really understand why that's an excuse to get them to come fix, the water meter or something. And then on the talent front, again, somewhat related, not directly, it's been harder on the staffing side. I'm seeing property management staff turnover a lot harder to find people in that regard. So, that we're seeing a little less than the supply front, but I've got to imagine a lot of people are, and certainly costs are going up. To a certain.
And are you increasing your inflation assumptions for budgets and new projects? At CDT, we are certainly, insurance is skyrocketing, payroll costs are going up, maintenance costs to some degree. So it's probably not as scientific as I'd like, but everybody's got different access to different services or better buying power than others. But I would say payroll, insurance, real estate taxes are primarily where we're seeing increases. We are a little bullish on the rent side too, which is nice for a change. Right, well, I guess with inflation, you can increase rents. Lisa, do you want to comment on that at all?
I mean, I think we've only seen the appliance impact for sure on our residential properties. We're also, when we build out tenant spaces, a lot of the FF&E where the furniture is taking forever. And so there's been some big delays there, and certainly increases in costs, and similar to what Joan had mentioned on the payroll front as well as some of the R&M. So I think very similar.
Julia?
Again, very similar to what Joan and Lisa described, definitely increases in terms of construction costs. We're now having to go back and reevaluate scenarios that, we had estimates for maybe 4 months ago, and those numbers are very stale. So I think one of the things that we were looking to figure out, and I think there's some clarity now, is whether or not this inflation was transitory. And, being that it came in as hot as it has been, I think that there's a very good chance that it's here, permanently.
And I know you're working that into your budgets for next year.
We're working it into our 2022 budgets for right now. I don't think that, we've significantly increased our inflation assumptions for the outer years.
Not interesting.
Just yet, that is.
Just yet, right? And I mean, I think that that's sort of the next hot topic, right? You have labor supply shortage, you have supply chain issues, and people are now talking about inflation and how that's going to impact every asset across the board. So I think that might be interesting. I'm curious to know, we talked a little bit about occupancy and office occupancy being, physical office occupancy being at 28% and hopefully going up in January. And I was curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of what's going to happen in New York. Is it going to come back? What are you seeing playing out? One thing I have to say is that I've noticed that some tenants or some companies seem to look like they're actually now suddenly trying to take advantage of the leverage they have in the down market and shifting from the short-term leases to the long-term leases. I wonder if you have a take on that.
So I think that we're definitely seeing things pick up in terms of activity tours. There's companies that are now, they seem to be willing to commit to longer term deals. Although we still have, companies that are their size is changing. They start out the process and they're, 10,000 feet. And then as they go along, they're 8,000 and then they're 12,000. Because I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the future of workspace and hybrid versus full-time versus remote. And so there's just a lot of questions out there right now. But I think, our perspective is New York, New York always comes back. I think, we're not, there's no doubt in our minds. It's just a matter of when. And I think from our portfolio, what we're hearing from tenants who are not yet back in the office is that they do plan to come back in January. There's still some companies that are hybrid, and then there's many companies that are still trying to figure it out. But I think at the end of the day, what we're hearing is that they still need the office, even if they are going to have some people working remotely. They're not expecting to downsize because the people that are coming in, they either need to reconfigure their space, they need more space for collaboration, or people in general just want to have more space around them, versus all being very close together and bench seating the way that, things were pre-pandemic. So I think all signs are positive. And I think there's going to be some pent up demand in the market out there. And companies are going to be rushing to try to nail down space here before things really start to come back. So that's just my perspective.
Hey, Carrie, it's Barbara. Would you mind if I interjected with some audience Q&A at this point?
Oh, no, go ahead.
The first one, I'm just going to read because I don't want to risk paraphrasing it incorrectly. And thank you, Sherry Best, for writing a book here today.
I know, sorry.
This pertains to artificial intelligence, so probably is more for Lisa and certainly Julia and possibly Stella. So regarding AI, are any of your companies utilizing or looking into integrated total building solutions, which integrate all building management systems with bidirectional communication so that you can have a single source for reporting, analytics, demand response, controls for security, lighting, heating, etc., and billing, which can be monitored and even controlled remotely, and add fire and life safety to that pile too?
Sounds like
who
the
wants to
Holy
go?
Grail.
There you
That's
go, Lisa.
amazing.
Yes. So take your best shot.
Well, if that exists, I would love to know how I get that.
Okay, then.
No, we haven't. I mean, we're certainly focused on a lot of automation, but we haven't gotten to a place yet where we can even think about, all of that together. But it sounds amazing. I don't know if Julia or Joan or Stella, you have any thoughts about it, but.
No.
Julia?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So I would say, to my knowledge, no. But for the most part, our core portfolio is a little bit older. So it's not as if we have a tremendous number of brand new office or residential buildings. I think that may be an area where we would certainly look into that. Kimco is very serious about sustainability. So if such a system exists, I'd love to hear about it.
Okay,
Stella, were you going to add? Stella, were you going to add something?
I don't really know, to be honest. I'm at the Bank of America Tower, and that building is just so amazing.
Oh, it's a new one. As you see,
it's a new one. So everything in it is brand new and LEED and top of the line, even to the point where the bank is trying this pilot program on reserving your desk as you come in every day. And you don't have to bring your laptop to connect to it. You just put in your identification and you work from any desk that you want. So you can move around, really. That's probably the most AI I have that I know of. I'm sure there's more. That's it. And then the perks that we get. That's it.
And well, thank you, Stella. Those perks are important and actually lead me very nicely into the next question. Talk about whether or not you have an opinion and or are implementing. We're hearing a lot about the luxury amenities that now office buildings, and Lisa, you probably have a better handle on this than anybody, are, including in what they're doing as part of the pitch for tenants, similar to what the luxury residential buildings have done, everything from doggy showers to bars to private restaurants and the like. So Lisa, Stella, anybody want to address that? Your thoughts on that, what you're doing, what you're seeing?
So through our Inspire brand, we're doing, we haven't gotten to doggy showers yet. We're still trying to figure out a dog policy because we're getting more and more companies asking if their employees can bring dogs to the office. But I think we've been doing mostly amenity spaces. So an alternative location where you can go and do your work. Whether that is, on a couch, whether it's in a conference room, whether there's a Zoom room available to you, but just options for you to work outside of your more traditional office. We've got outdoor terraces as a big thing, especially now post-COVID. Food is extremely important. We're trying to put food in all of our amenity spaces, especially as people start coming back. They're hesitant to go outside the office to another location, interact with more people and bring them. So we're doing food delivery to people's desks. We're doing restaurants and food halls within our amenity spaces. And so I think those are the key things that we find prospective tenants asking for in tours is food, some sort of collaborative space where they can rent a conference room or host an event, and optionality and flexibility for their employees in terms of where they can do work, depending on, if it's heads down work, collaborative work, et cetera.
Does somebody else want to add any thoughts on that?
Well,
No?
I was mentioning the perks. That's kind of what the bank has been
Right.
doing, the amenities to get us in the office.
Right,
The
right.
discounted lunches, free coffee
Yeah.
bar, juice
Yeah.
bar, and all these workspaces where you can go in. You don't have to necessarily sit at your desk. You can reserve another room. They have like a phone booth for private conversations, a gym.
Yeah,
You don't
the
have
fitness
to, we
is big
can't bring
too.
our dogs yet.
Pretty soon there will be
'Cause
no
we're trying
line. Right.
Oh,
There'll
no, I
be
was
no
just gonna
line
say we-
between living and working. Sorry, Lisa, you go.
No, I was just going to say one of the challenges we're having is in getting people back to the office is now we're competing with their home. So we're trying to figure out like what can we offer in an
right,
office building that's going to be more appealing than their couch.
Right,
And
right.
it's when you have the commute to contend
Yeah.
with, it makes it a little challenging. But the more we can offer that provides them, whether it's wellness or options or flexibility or food, collaborative space, that's how we're trying to convince everyone to come back.
You guys are way
Thank
too
you.
nice. Way
Okay.
too nice. I offer a
so I-
paycheck.
We touched
Hold on. This isn't
That's
open
happening.
discussion yet, guys.
We touched on AI, we touched on tenant amenities.
Well, we're not quite done yet, Carrie. I want to get to another question if you don't mind,
Okay.
in the
One
Q&A
other
before.
question, 'cause I have a question for the group too, so go
Well,
ahead.
you please take it away in just 1 minute. Because this is on retail and I wanted to direct this primarily to Julia, but I know Stella, you have a lot of retail in your portfolio, and it has to do with what we obviously know, which is the huge amount of vacant retail space in New York City, vacancy, referring to the traditional definition of vacancy. Do you see an uptick in demand for new tenants? Do you see brick and mortar retail recovering in the near future? Julia, thoughts?
Yeah, so my portfolio is largely suburban, so it's just
Right.
outside, the boroughs. I will say that our stuff in the boroughs has held up very well. But that being said, we haven't seen the softening or the vacancy that you've seen in, say, Soho or the financial district.
Mm-hmm. Stella, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I don't have Manhattan portfolio, so I
Okay.
just see a lot of empty spaces,
So
just
I'm gonna then cut to one more quickly, Carrie, and then back to you. There was one question, and I think I know where it comes from. By the way, you should know that doggy showers are apparently already a big rage in Pittsburgh. So who knew that they would be ahead of us on that curve? Thank you, Sarah Marsh. Okay. Do you use a stat in terms of, particularly in terms of Inspire, but maybe in terms of these other luxury amenities that commercial buildings are adding? Are you incorporating aesthetic elements into that as well? Artwork, art installations, things like that? Are you seeing that they're, being demanded by tenants or appreciated by tenants, or, what are you seeing in that way?
So yes, we're huge on art here at Silverstein. So we not only incorporate artwork, but we've been incorporating, green walls and all sorts of plants, if possible, to help just with that general feeling of wellness and light and all of that. But also we do a lot of graffiti art in our buildings, and I don't know if anyone's been down to the World Trade Center recently, but you'll see a lot of it outside on the World Trade Center site, but we do some of it on the floors, on raw floors in our buildings as well. And it's been really interesting how well it attracts some of the creative types, different creative firms, technology firms. We've actually done it just to create an interesting kind of white boxed space, if you will, with artwork on the walls. But we've had companies that have wanted to keep it when they leased the space and incorporated it into their design. So it's been kind of a fun element that's been a bit unique and has really, I think, helped us lease space, but it's also become very much a part of our amenity spaces and our culture here at Silverstone.
Thank you. And thank you, Leah. Now, Carrie, I'm turning it right back to you. We do have other questions, but you go.
Okay, so we've touched on AI, we've touched on tenant amenities. One of the other hot topics right now is ESG, and I'm curious to know how what you feel like the demand is from your investors, from your partners, from your tenants. Joan, maybe you go first because that's such a big part of affordable housing.
Can I just, Joan, I don't want to be too, I don't want to have this come across the wrong way, but just in an abundance of caution, could you please explain what ESG stands for?
Oh, sure. It's, well, now I have to look at that up. It's environmental, social,
Governance.
And governance. I don't know the pretty way of saying it, but yeah, I'll try to be quick here. Certainly all of our investments are Community Reinvestment Act eligible. So we're lending on multifamily or charter schools. On the equity side, we're investing in affordable housing. So social is by our mission, preservation of affordable housing. We're all over that. What we've gotten better at is measuring that impact that we're having and reporting on that. Because yes, current investors and potential investors and our board are very interested in that. Governance has been something that we have been looking at and tightening up for the last several years. Before it was a rage, I think we've been very, very good at that. Something that we're really starting to focus on more is environmental. We've looked at our properties as a whole to see where we might have risks, et cetera. But we're still learning about how we're going to measure that and report on that. We're still, climate change is everywhere. It's going to affect us wherever we invest. But that's the one that we probably have to tighten up more on. I mean, I think this is something that is going to stay. And as we get better technology at our firm, we'll get better at monitoring and reporting on that. So.
Anybody else want to comment on that and how it's impacting their portfolios?
I don't have a comment on that for my portfolio.
Okay. All right, Lisa? I would think that,
I mean, I think it's extremely important. It's here to stay. It's something that we continue to focus on throughout our properties. I think it's just going to become more and more important.
I think investors are going to drive a lot of that too.
Yes.
Yep. For sure.
Investors will.
Yep.
The investors are, and tenants. The tenants are starting to ask about it or make it, certain principles, requirements for the buildings that they look at. So it's definitely here to stay.
Barbara, are there any other questions in the chat that you want to raise? I know we're kind of coming up on 1 o'clock here, so you're on mute, I think.
Thank you.
Barbara, you're on mute.
Yes, I know we talked about having each of our speakers, weigh in on advice from those who might be interested in careers in this space. So I'll ask one more quick one. I think, Joan, you mentioned, and others sort of had the same thought about during the past 18 months, really focusing on financial stressors and modeling and all of that. But I'm curious to know from a personal relationship point of view, how much outreach did you do with your tenants and how did it differ from normal personal outreach that you might do with your tenants?
I'm sorry,
I hope I got that right.
First? Yeah.
Go ahead, Joan. Yeah.
Yeah, our tenant, we invest in via joint ventures, and again, our residents are then reporting to or talking more to the property managers than they are to us. So I think that there was very good outreach to our tenants from the property management side. Talk about essential workers. You have people going into apartment complexes and they're, fixing the things that break and working on leases and working out how to show units virtually. And, they were putting themselves at big risk to do all this. So they got very creative, trying to do everything more, virtual tours and the like. And I think the counterparties that we have are again, property managers or our partners, et cetera. That was really just, again, doing Zoom and making sure you reach out. That was the hardest thing to remember, is don't just enjoy the quiet of home, but remember that there were people there to talk to, and you learn a lot more. And I think Zoom, I know people are sick of it. I think it's much better than having a conference call. So I think it should stay this way forever if we're not in the same office.
Thank you, Joan. At another time, my personal question had to do with the Lennar partnership with Icon, who is printing 3D residential home communities in Texas. I find that fascinating, but I'm going to turn it back to you, Carrie, to close it out with our final question for our panelists.
All right, the final question, is just, if you could give some advice to the listeners about, what, for people who are starting a career in asset management or want to shift to asset management, what are some of the takeaways? You've all had such extensive careers in asset management. What advice do you have to the audience? And, what should they take away from this conversation?
I would say basically to position yourself as a strategic partner to team members. So if you show a willingness to collaborate and that you're able to make a contribution, it really helps develop those relationships. You want to invest as much as you can into the relationships and networks. And then to listen to the perspectives of others, especially those with different skill sets and that can offer a unique point of view. I think, that's where you really start to develop a big picture worldview of how relevant everything is in real estate, because it is. It's, it's not just finance. It's not just investing. I mean, it's, building that connection with communities, whether it's on the residential side or the retail side. I mean, it's one of the unique career paths where you'll come in contact with just about everything.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of the reasons why I love asset management. Lisa?
I think I 100% agree with Julia. I think I would also say, I think one of the hardest but best parts, I would say, of asset management is that you have to think about the details, but also the big picture,
Yes,
all at the same time, like on everything that you do. And you constantly have to connect the dots. You can never think in silos. You always have to think holistically. And it's very challenging to do that. But I think if you're able to, it can be, extremely rewarding, and you can be very successful.
Lisa, that's one of the things I love about it too. Joan, you were going to add something?
Well, I was going to say learning how to juggle is a really good skill to have, and keep it all straight. And that one thing that's been very challenging for me is networking with other asset managers, developers, conferences. There's always conferences for the acquisitions people and all the, that kind of stuff. But I don't think this is such a unique forum. I was very excited about it, that it's asset managers to meet other asset managers, even if they're not the same property type or whatever. It doesn't matter. I still see some commonality between what people are dealing with. So I think it's learning to be organized, certainly, presenting yourself as being collaborative, et cetera. And then just networking is so important. Finding other asset managers and asking questions a lot, I think, is just really helpful, so that you find out where you might, what property type you're more interested in, and where you want to be. But it's a wonderful introduction, I think, for, somebody out of school or whatever, somebody just getting a foothold in real estate, because you deal with as everybody said, the detail. You can be worrying about the curb cut and then, whether to sell a property. It's just, it's all there. So.
Thank you, Joan. Stella, did you want to add something quickly so we can close?
I was going to say the same thing. It's just I lean on my team members that for my group, because we all came from different disciplines, appraiser or certified property managers, and everybody had a different background when we came into asset management. So I networking and leaning into my team members for help, advice, bouncing ideas, all that good stuff. And asset management touches so many disciplines. I talk to different people all the time, surveyors, attorneys all the time, title people. So it's
Contractors.
contractors. I mean,
Yeah, I was hoping to get a little more into that, but
Lenders.
time hasn't permitted that today. Thank you, Stella. I just want to close us out by saying, let's give a big hand to our amazing speakers for generously sharing their wisdom and insights today. I can't imagine a better program than this. Joan Berkowitz, Lisa Bavacqua, Julia Rocco, and Stella Sharippa. And also to Carrie Pianin, our facilitator extraordinaire, for skillfully leading really such a terrific discussion. You can connect with them all through CrewBiz, by the way, as Crew New York members. I'm going to circulate a link to the video recording on our YouTube channel within the next week. That'll go to all registrants. And so with that, I say thank you all for coming. Stay safe, be well, and enjoy the coming holidays. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.